Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you today from Firebird Healing. And I'm with one of my favorite people to have conversations with, Mr. TJ Woodward. TJ is the creator of this wonderful work called Conscious Recovery. He's written books and a series of workbooks that go along with it. He's also the author of Conscious Creation, Conscious Being. He wrote a whole trilogy of books around becoming more conscious. And I'm super excited to be his co-collaborator with these creations and just to be having a different conversation about addiction than I think is the usual thing we're hearing from the standard treatment paradigm and community. So welcome, TJ.
Thank you, Adriana. So happy to be here. I'm looking right now to see if we're live on Facebook, and here it is. It's also exciting. I love technology.
Yes, we're on a new platform today. We're playing with StreamYard, so it's kind of new to us. So, you know, it's we're on a learning curve, but so far so good. So welcome to everyone who is watching this today or in the future. If you have any comments or questions, please do be sure to type them into whatever platform you're on, and they will get to us and we can respond to them. Hi, Ruth. Nice to see you here. So we wanted to pose kind of a controversial question. And TJ, I'm going to let you start. So can people really heal from addiction?
Yes, people can heal from addiction. And the reason that we are asking the question is we're looking at the old paradigm. And the old paradigm sounded something like this. You can never actually heal from addiction. You can only treat it one day at a time. And I understand the spirit of that because sometimes people, the mind is a trickster, right? So sometimes when we say, yes, you can heal from addiction, someone will say, oh, so I can drink and use again. That could be a personal choice. It's not one that I'm choosing as a person in recovery. That's not really what we're talking about. What we're really talking about here is the idea that we can actually heal the underlying root causes that were really at the root of the addiction. Those can be healed. So addiction is not necessarily a lifelong chronic experience. It can be something that we move beyond, especially in the way we view ourselves. Because we hear a lot of people say things like, well, I'm never going to be blah, blah, blah because I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic. I remember hearing my friends say, well, I'm just an effed up alcoholic, so I don't know how to have relationships. And he was 26 years sober, so it was a little heartbreaking for me. So that's really what we're talking about today.
Yes. So in this idea of root causes of addiction, I know what I often talk about with folks, whether it's addiction or actually any issue. I would look at the depression or anxiety or PTSD or any kind of even a physical condition like diabetes or a heart condition or whatever. I'm always looking for the root cause of something because I think too much of Western medicine and Western psychiatry is palliative medicine, meaning we're trying to reduce symptoms. We're trying to minimize symptoms as much as we can so that the person can function in the world. So it's kind of like triage in a sense, you know, if you remember the show, some of us are old enough to remember the show MASH. And you know how the soldiers would come in wounded, we'd patch them up and then send them back out again, right? And I think that's how the traditional paradigm has worked in the West. I think the East has a different philosophy. And what we're talking about is actually going deep enough into the issues to discover what it is as root cause. And then the other metaphor that people often get is like, you know, if you've got weeds growing in your garden, you take a lawnmower to them and that'll mow them down for the time being, but they're going to grow back. You're not going to really get rid of them until you yank them out at the roots. And so we know that it's possible to yank addiction out at its roots. But first we have to look at what those root causes are. So TJ, tell us more about that.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And you know, I want to add to it, there's nothing inherently wrong with treating symptoms. It's just not the whole story, right? And I love your analogy because if you're just cutting down, you know, I use the analogy of the seed in the tree. If you plant a maple seed, you're going to get a maple tree. And if you only cut the tree down or trim the branches, you're not really getting at that seed or that root. And so yes, triage is sometimes important, but what we're talking about is that's kind of where addiction treatment has stopped. Honestly, we hear people saying we don't address trauma in treatment, we don't address the underlying root causes, we stabilize them and get them the help they need. And I'm like, well, they're back for 8 times in treatment. There's something more wanting to be healed here. When it comes to root causes, we recognize there are many different factors that contribute to addiction. There might be biological factors, there are certainly emotional and mental factors, and there are spiritual factors. In conscious recovery, I identify the root causes of addiction as unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying they're the only root causes, but in my own personal recovery and in my 15 years of working in the addiction treatment field, these root causes I see in 100% of the people I've worked with. So that's how I came up with that. I'm not saying that's the only thing that causes addiction, but I think sometimes, in your wonderful podcast, you look at like a different way to look at mental health as well, right? Because we often will say you have a chemical imbalance or you have a biological disorder, and that may be true or it may not be true. For sure, it's only part of the story.
Right. And people think that just behavior modification alone, if you just stop drinking and using, if you stop hanging around the people who use, if you make these sort of behavior changes, that should be sufficient for you to maintain sobriety. And that's what a lot of traditional treatment is focused on. But to me, that's a setup for kind of white knuckling it. You're not, that's fine to remove someone from their toxic environment and put them in a healthy place where they can sleep and eat and all those things. But until we do the shadow work, which is something I want you to talk about, like, people really are likely to have a recurrence. And that's why we see, yes, like addiction has some of the highest relapse rates of any other medical condition, anything we want to call a diagnosis, has some of the worst recurring relapsing statistics, because I think for this reason, people are not going, they're putting a Band-Aid on it and they're not going deep enough beyond behavior modification to actually create lasting, sustainable change. So tell us about.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is rings so true for me, because the behavior modification is important, but I think that's where people stop, right? So like the behavior modification for someone who maybe is in treatment for the first time and they're looking at how they can change the way they're showing up in the world. I mean, it's kind of like telling someone with depression, well, you should just get out more and exercise because you're going to feel better. And they're like, yeah, but I can't get out of bed. Well, but you should get out and exercise, right? And so nothing could be truer and less useful. And that's true also for someone with an addiction, right? Well, you should stop using or just go get a job, right? To someone who's struggling. So it's much more layered than that. And of course, changing our behavior is really important. But what I hear you saying is that's only one piece of it. The deeper work here is what is actually at the root of it that is causing the behavior. You and I call addiction not a coping mechanism, we call it a brilliant strategy. And that comes right out of conscious recovery, because it saved my life. Drugs and alcohol literally saved my life. This is not just a platitude. This is, I think if I hadn't drank or used, I probably wouldn't be alive. And I mean that. So how can I think it's something that's bad? Now, I crossed a line with it where it started causing a lot of destruction in my life and in the people's lives around me. So I'm not saying, oh, yay, addiction is great. What I am saying is when we look at it through the lens of it being a brilliant strategy, we can start to ask what it was managing. What was I numbing out? What was I running from? I think of it in terms of anger, for example. We tell people, we send them to anger management courses. Right. Instead of asking, what is the anger managing? It's a very different question, right? The anger is a strategy. And for some of us, like, anger is not one that I'm a huge default. I don't default to that one. I have all my own. I have my own smorgasbord over here of my strategies. But for someone who's angry, to say to them, you shouldn't be angry, that's not really going to help. So to say, what do you think's under the anger? What do you think is that strategy managing? And where did this strategy originate?
Yes. I love that people like Dr. Gabor Mate are talking so much about this as well. And they're saying, like, the addiction is not the problem. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of a bigger problem, of some underlying cause or condition or whatever. And that's, I think we're very much, resonant with that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's also, I love what Gabor says, it's the pain too. And Eckhart
Yes.
Tolle talks about that. Addiction is in some way, we're really running from pain, or sometimes people will say, well, I don't have those underlying root causes. I don't have trauma, disconnection, or shame. I just like how cocaine feels. Right. And so even that statement alone, it's like, yeah, I want more of this. I want to change the way I'm feeling. And so
Yes.
the relationship with the feelings is so important, because there is pain at the root of it. Now, I didn't at 13, I wasn't walking around saying, I have so much unresolved trauma, so much disconnection, and so much shame, and I hope I can find something that's a relief. No, someone handed me weed, I smoked it, and I loved it. And it wasn't super conscious that I was managing something, but what I realized in retrospect is that was the strategy to help me feel whole again, or at least to numb out this sense of not feeling whole.
Right. Right. So let's talk just a little bit more about that. So when you talk about these three root causes of addiction as being unresolved trauma, toxic shame, and spiritual disconnection, can you just give us a brief overview of what those things are?
Yes, let's start with trauma, because it's something now. I mean, Adriana, you and I met over a decade ago working in the field, and there was a little talk of trauma, but now it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about trauma. And I think trauma is one of those things that is maybe easy to confuse what it is and what it isn't. Here's the important thing. It's not really for me to say what's traumatic for someone else. It's really someone self-identifying. I have a couple of things that seem really innocuous, that they weren't a big deal, but they were a huge deal to me. Like, I remember an experience in kindergarten where I decided I was stupid. It wasn't a huge event. It wasn't someone hitting me. It wasn't sexual trauma. It was me deciding that I was stupid at a very, very deep level and at a very young age. So trauma really is anything that takes us out of the experience of our own wholeness, our own sense of presence, our own sense of openness. And if you were born on planet Earth, which I'm assuming people who are watching were, you have trauma.
Yes. Yes. Being here is not this isn't not an easy place to exist, right? There's a lot of intensity. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of hatred, a lot of discrimination. I mean, we know, it's just, it's not easy, and it hasn't been easy, especially in these last few years. So, so that's the trauma piece. Okay. Then let's talk about what impact does that trauma have on people?
Well, as I said, the trauma leads to a disconnection from ourselves, which I call spiritual disconnection. And that word spiritual might not work for everyone. So what I really mean is the essential spirit that we are. I'm not talking about an ideology or a concept. I'm talking about the experience of ourselves, a deep connection with our true nature. For some, they wouldn't use the word spiritual. So we come into the world as whole and perfect beings, very, very much infinite beings, pre-programmed. We're open, we're loving. My husband Will and I were on a walk yesterday on the Venice canals, and there was this little baby, maybe a year old, and her laughter was so infectious. She was just laughing and laughing and laughing. And I was reminded that's who we are. That's our innate experience, right? And we spend tens of thousands of dollars in workshops and treatment and therapy trying to be more present, feel our feelings, and more in a state of joy. And it's already who we are inherently. That's what I mean by disconnection. The trauma causes us to disconnect from that experience of our true nature, and we start believing all these lies about ourselves.
Yes, the core false beliefs.
Yes. And that really is shame. Yeah, me too. You and I love that term, right? Because a lot of times we hear people talk about core beliefs or core memories or core ideas, but we like to add the word false because we want to say these are lies that we've picked up about ourselves. This isn't the truth of who we are. It's the persona, it's the lie, it's the thing, the bully on the playground, the kindergarten teacher. I don't know why I'm in kindergarten right now. There must be something there, but at a very early age,
from kindergarten.
something unresolved in kindergarten that I'm becoming aware of in this moment.
Yes. Yes. And then the toxic shame, I also really like that pairing with the word, that descriptor of it being toxic. And I think sometimes people get confused about the difference between shame and guilt. Can you explain that?
Yeah, sometimes when I say toxic shame, people were saying, well, is there shame that's non-toxic? And we've evolved in our language. I think about John Bradshaw, who was one of my heroes in the 80s. He wrote the book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. And he actually talks about healthy and unhealthy shame. Now we call it guilt and shame. So in some ways it's semantics, but what guilt is a belief or an idea that I've done something wrong. And if you're a human being, we've done things that maybe we're not happy about, we're not proud of. Those are things that we can correct behaviorally. Shame is different. Shame is, I believe I am wrong. I believe I'm fundamentally broken. So it's not that I've done something, it's that I am something. And that's untrue. And that untruth is toxic to our system. And this is, your journey is a journey in the manifestation of physical health issues, right? It's toxic in our system, and that'll show up as toxic relationships. That'll show up as a mental health concern. That'll show up as physical issues. Science is catching up with that now. I know that like big institutions like Kaiser are saying, oh, wow, there is an effect on that shame. I don't know if they're using the word shame, but they're saying our thoughts and our ideas do actually affect our mental and physical health.
Yes. Yes. So I want you to go back for a moment to your own experience. I mean, you wrote about in conscious recovery, how you got sober pretty early in life, and which is amazing. But you weren't living a life of what's possible with sobriety.
Completely.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I got sober in 1986, so I was almost 21. And the paradigm at that time sounded something like this: don't worry about anything but not drinking. You're a miracle. Now go help someone else. And that had worked really well for me. But it was, again, it's kind of a behavior modification model. It's like, oh, I should be happy I'm not drinking. But now I know I took away the strategy. I took away the one thing that was helping me. And for the first year or so, I was just I was grateful to go to work. I was grateful to like not almost being fired. I was grateful to be able to pay my rent, like some really basic things. Mostly what I was grateful for was human connection, like genuine human connection. But there was a point around a year and a half sober where I found myself suicidal because I hadn't addressed the underlying root causes. I hadn't addressed the trauma. I hadn't addressed my disconnection or my shame. So I was walking around feeling damaged and broken and trying so desperately to plug into someone or something to feel whole again. And that was in sobriety. And then I didn't have the alcohol or the drugs to numb it out. So it became really, really painful before I went on a deeper journey inward.
Yeah. Yeah. And you did the work. And in fact, your journey took you to all kinds of places you would have never imagined. I guess like going to India and studying, different forms of spirituality, and even becoming a minister and different things, right? So
so many things. Yeah.
so many things, right? So when we work with folks, with whether it's in groups, whether we're teaching the conscious recovery material to treatment programs or whatever it is, what do you think is different, and how have people received this material differently?
I'm fresh off of watching a podcast interview literally right before we started this show, and I was emotional. So I'm like, let me like dry up my tears. With Peaks Recovery Center in Colorado, and they're the newest conscious recovery certified treatment program. And 3 members of their staff were talking in this podcast about the impact of conscious recovery already in just a few weeks that they've been using it. But what they spoke to, I thought, was even more powerful than, oh my gosh, wow, conscious recovery is so amazing. What they spoke to is, this is what we were doing at the essence, at the core of it. But TJ came along with this conscious recovery method and put language to this knowing. And they talked about their own evolution. And I can say all this because they literally just put it on YouTube. Their own evolution from their own treatment model years ago, where they would say, unconsciously, they would say, the person is broken. Our job is to fix them. The founder on this interview said, yeah, when I did my training as a counselor, drug and alcohol counselor, they said if the addict's lips are moving, they're lying. Right. So that's the old paradigm. And he said that's the way their program started. And through this evolution they've been going through the last few years, they realized that's not providing anyone with any agency. That's not helping anyone really heal. That's not empowering. And I know, Adriana, you used the term empowerment coach, empowering someone to actually do their own healing. And so I was very emotional watching it because they were talking about the 5 core principles of conscious recovery and how in alignment it was, and how grateful they are that they found yet another framework to help their clients really get in touch with that wholeness and perfection. And that's what kept coming through in that interview. The chief clinical officer shared that since the training, which was a few weeks ago, every single day he's invited himself to ask himself to get in touch with the part of him that's whole and perfect. And just that alone is so emotional for me because of the years I felt so broken, because of the messages that the world offers us that we're broken in some way, or we need to look a certain way, or dress a certain way, or earn a certain amount of money to be acceptable. And the truth is, we're inherently infinite, beautiful, precious beings. That's a totally different paradigm as a starting point for how we treat, but more importantly, heal addiction.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's what we're really getting clear on. Treating something does not necessarily equate healing from it. Treating it is applying a method. Treating it is applying a medicine, a bandage or something like that. It's not really allowing the healing to happen holistically, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that's another piece of the conscious recovery work, right? We are addressing all 4 of those aspects.
Yeah, and I want to plug this amazing book. It's called What If You're Not as Fucked Up as You Think You Are? And there I said the whole word. So sorry if YouTube, gets rid of this video or something, but that's your new book. It's not that new now. But what I love about your book, and I read it on a long trip and I absolutely love it. What I love about your book is you bring in all these different modalities, which are kind of coming to the same, not necessarily the same conclusion, but the same approach, which is healing as possible, right? And I love that you've created Firebird healing, right? And what I really appreciated about your book is it was very practical in that you offered a lot of tools, but it's always leading someone back to the same place, which is the answers are within, the wisdom is within, and it's really about creating or carving out a place for us to be able to listen to that inner wisdom, and the body does its own healing. The body naturally wants to heal. I'm not saying we don't need outside help, or sometimes we need medicines, or, if someone cuts my hand off, I'm going to go to an emergency room.
Of course.
But most of the time we're not in that kind of emergency, but a lot of times we feel like we are. And that's the difference.
Yeah, agreed. And so I think what we're saying is that the healing we have within us all that we require to heal, which is actually a very traditional Eastern perspective on healing, and more traditional across different cultures, that we have within us the capacity to restore balance and wholeness to our beings, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's just that I think in our Western culture, we're not taught that. And we're also not given the tools. And so what conscious recovery, along with, for me anyways, some of the other stuff that I work with, it is all about giving people tools, giving them guidance, giving them a safe space and support to be able to engage with this deeper healing work. Facing the shadow is a part of it. That's like all that stuff you kind of avoided, that you didn't want to deal with, the unresolved trauma you may have been drinking or using over, whatever that is, the core false beliefs, but that together we provide a safe space for the person to explore that material and start to look at it and practice some of these spiritual principles that I just love, that are so beautiful, that are described later in the book. We really embody that in the sessions, in our workshops, in our retreats. Can you just briefly talk about those spiritual principles?
Yeah, I mean, there are many different principles that we offer in conscious recovery. It all leads back to this idea of inherent perfection and that the answers are within us. So we have practices like living in the question. Living in the question allows us to expand the possibilities rather than being restricted by our judgments. That's one practice. I mean, some of the most obvious ones are mindfulness and meditation, spending time in the silence, moving out of being dominated by the mind. The mind is important and it's powerful. We're not trying to get rid of it. What we're trying to realize is, oh, when I slow down and when I take a deep breath and when I connect very deeply with my core essence, there's information there that's so much more powerful than just me trying to figure it out in my mind. I mean, that's exhausting. And there are other practices as well, but those are the two that stood out to me in this moment to speak to.
Yeah, I mean, it's stuff that, you might hear about a little bit in recovery, things like gratitude and forgiveness and compassion and non-judgment and non-resistance are actually two of my favorites.
Yeah.
But really, like, not just paying kind of lip service to these concepts because they can seem abstract to people, but actually walking people through experiential exercises that help them to really get that concept on a much deeper, profound level, not an intellectual level. Which is why, for me, as someone who facilitates groups at a drug and alcohol rehab, the conscious recovery groups tend to be the most dynamic. People are getting up, they're moving around, they're engaging in a small group, they're doing things in a larger group. They might be going off on their own to meditate or journal about something, and then we're bringing that information back in and we're looking at it from all these different perspectives, because the power of perspective is so important, and to help people come out of this disempowered victim consciousness where they're seeing themselves as broken and defective, and to be able to empower themselves to recognize that, hey, what if I'm not as effed up as I think I am, and what if I am whole and perfect, and then I'm not broken and don't need fixing. It's just, I need to, it's like that our task is, in the Rumi quote, our task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek the barriers that we have put up to it. Right? It's one of our favorites.
Yeah. And well, I mean, just at the core, we talk about love, and at the core, that's who and what we are, right? We come in naturally with the ability to love and connect, and not only the ability, but it's an actual, I mean, if a baby does not get love and connection, they literally die. Like hugs, physical contact, love, compassion, all of that is actually a need. It's not a want, right? And a lot of times we might forget that because we might think, I mean, for all the stuff that came through with COVID and all the drama and all the one thing that I was aware of is that we were shifting or the primary focus was only on physical well-being, which of course I understand why. We were in a crisis and people went into crisis, they went into survival, but the focus was only on physical well-being, and we, for many people, lost touch with the importance of the emotional well-being, the spiritual well-being and the mental well-being. So we weren't getting the love and connection, and so people were really suffering. And I think we're seeing the effect of that now. When you're in the midst of a trauma, especially a global trauma, which this was, the symptoms, if you will, or the effect of that trauma doesn't show up until we perceive we're through it. And so some people say we're still in COVID. Some people say it ended 3 days after it started. Whatever you feel about it, we're enough on the other side now where we're starting to thaw out and like get back to normal. But people can't always get back to normal if they haven't had the love and the connection that is required for us to thrive. And so I'm just saying, people are going, there's a collective challenging time right now that I sense in people. And I want to just offer love and compassion and understanding, and an awareness of this will help us all navigate this in a way that's not like just, get back at it. Right.
Yeah. Sorry, my light went out.
Perfect timing.
My light went out. So let's move into this, like some of the things that we have as offerings, because I think the other thing I love about conscious recovery is that there's so many different ways in which you can get access to this material. And of course, it could start with getting the book and just reading about it and having the book kind of open up some different perspectives about yourself, about your brilliant strategies, whatever it may be. And then from there are many other kinds of offerings. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, I mean, it is a book. And if you're anything like me, especially earlier in my recovery, reading wasn't always easy for me. I had a narrative that I had ADD and I couldn't focus. That might be true. So there's an audiobook. There are workbooks. I know you and I collaborated because I mean, either you approached me or I approached you, or we were in a conversation and like some of these concepts sound a little nebulous, I guess I would say. And let's get them, a little abstract, and let's get them more concrete. And I love that that's what you bring. So we created the workbooks, and that is to help someone take these concepts and really use them in their own life. From there, I partnered with wholehearted.org. They've just relaunched their platform with their courses. So there's a conscious recovery for people in recovery course. We have a retreat coming up, which I know we're going to talk about. Adriana and I have facilitated multiple conscious recovery retreats. We haven't since COVID, so we're excited that we're going to be doing our first in-person retreat this year later. So there's a lot of different ways to access it. And I know there are conscious recovery book groups springing up throughout the country, I think, maybe the world. So there's a lot of different ways. And then, of course, treatment programs are using conscious recovery as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that it's offered in so many different ways. You could use it on your own, through the video course, through the book, and the workbooks. You could be part of a book study or a treatment group that is offering this, and you can be in an even larger, bigger, kind of longer period of time. Like I teach conscious recovery for an hour and a half once a week at the rehab. People are there 30 days, 60 days. So that's, 4 to 8 sessions. But when we go away somewhere and we do a retreat where it's just us, and we're usually in some beautiful place in nature, and we're really taking a deep dive, and we're also bringing in other holistic healing kinds of practices like sound healing or yoga and meditation. There's something that I think takes the whole material and the community aspect of it and exponentializes it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you don't know, we're doing a retreat in Bali, and we're super excited about it. Bali is someplace I have never been. I've been close. I've been to the Maldives and to Thailand, so getting close. But Bali is, everyone says it's such a magical place. And we're going to have a real opportunity, as Adriana said, to really drop in, be in community, and also have some other amazing experiences. So it's kind of set up as like one day of workshops, one day of integrating through sound healing. There's a pyramid experience. There's just some amazing things that are happening in Bali, and we would love to have you join us. I know we have a couple of exciting announcements about that, but it's in September. And Adriana, I know you might be able to tell them more about how they get more information and sign up. We're super excited.
Yeah, we could put a link in the box there in the comment section, but basically September 16th to the 23rd. And I know for some people it seems like a long time away, but the way that these kinds of events work, especially when you're planning something internationally, is you actually have to, we as the organizers and with our lovely Bali hosts, we have some local hosts there who know the land and are orchestrating all this wonderful stuff for us. They need a much more advanced notice. So we really are a bit under the time pressure now to get people signed up. We need to have a minimum of a certain number of people by May 15th. We are trying to keep this small, like 20 people or less, so it really can be a very intimate experience. So what we have decided to offer is that for people who sign up before that May 15th deadline, they will get 10% off of the retreat price. And for those of you who choose to sign up and pay in full, and it requires you to sign up and pay in full to make that commitment. And then for people who are signing up and paying in full prior to that, so April 30th, we will also offer a free session with myself or TJ. So you get a one-on-one private session to talk about whatever you would like to talk about, where you're at in your own process, how we might be able to support you with that. So we wanted to gift people that opportunity because we'd really like this retreat to happen. If we don't have enough people, we don't meet our minimum, we'll probably have to postpone it. And we'd rather not do that. This is supposed to be the most amazing time of year. We planned it around like the monsoon season and whatnot. So I think the weather will be very cooperative, and there's a fire ceremony. There's all this just amazing things there, participating in the local culture, really getting that immersive experience into a different way of being. And the people there are so kind and generous, and just the earth, the way the earth nurtures us and supports us in our healing process. And TJ, what do you think are some of the things based on our past retreats? What are some of the things that people have come away from with this type of experience?
Well, one of the things you and I talk about often is that it really is an experience. It's not so much a learning. In other words, you're not going to come to this retreat. I mean, you might learn new skills. You're going to walk away with a book and a workbook. You're going to walk away with access to a course after you leave. But really, it's about dropping in and having an experience. And that experience is a deep connection with ourselves and with each other. Adriana and I have facilitated many retreats in Mill Valley over the years, and there's something magical about just dropping in. And these retreats were only 3.5 days. This next one is 7 days. I'm just like, wow! And we're allowing for a lot more integration time. Every evening, you can go out into like the local areas, eat dinner, like really connect with, like Adriana said, the culture and the nature there. There is something so powerful about dropping in and having a deep experience of connection. And really the word that comes to mind is healing, that we can really create a safe space. And that's what we really create for people to heal, to really get in touch with that deep inner wisdom and have a transformation, a transformational experience.
Transformation is it, and empowering people to move from that place of broken and effed up and feeling like crap and moving into your strengths and your power and reconnecting with that part of you. It's always been there. It hasn't gone away, that is fundamentally whole and perfect, unharmed and unharmable. That essence still lies within. It's just that, the things you've experienced in your life and with addiction may have gotten in the way of that. And also to add to, like, this isn't actually just for people in recovery from addiction. We've had folks come to our retreats who wouldn't have identified as an alcoholic or addict and yet got a tremendous amount of benefit from it.
Yeah, because any of us who have ever used something or someone outside of ourselves to try to feel whole again qualify to come to the Conscious Recovery Retreat, because we know that the issue isn't whatever the brilliant strategy was. So this is open to everyone, 18 or over. And it's really going to be an experience of deep connection. That's really the best way that I can say it. And I love what you said, Adriana. The intention is that you walk away with a deeper understanding of who and what you really are, or who and what you truly be, as we like to say, and how you can access that more in your life. Because it's great to go in and have an experience of a retreat, but to have a transformation and come out with a very different relationship with yourself, that's the true intention of this retreat. And it's going to be in a beautiful place. I mean, it's going to be amazing. I'm excited. Yeah. I'm getting more excited. It seemed so far away, but then they're like, hey, you need to commit to, I'm like, oh, it's not so far away. I need to get my ticket, actually.
Yes. Yeah. So that's our invitation to you. If you all have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to TJ or myself. We're happy to answer any questions. The landing page for the retreat has been posted. From there, you can even see like a day-by-day itinerary of all the different activities that we'll be engaging in. And like I said, we have some lovely hosts in Bali. Any questions you might have, we can also pose to them and they can help our group, get whatever needs they need get met there, we can handle that. So I'm really looking forward to it. I would really love for this event to happen. And if this speaks to you, follow your knowing, follow your intuition, right? It's going to guide you to the places you need to go to get the healing that you need so that you can, what we talk about in Firebird healing, so you can be like the phoenix bird and you can rise from the ashes and triumph over your trauma and your addiction and whatever it is you feel that has wounded you and hurt you. It is possible to heal from those things. TJ and I are both living proof that healing at a fundamental level is absolutely possible and lasting, like permanent healing, not just like a Band-Aid and then the wound opens up again. I think both of us have shown that and worked with plenty of people to know that far deeper, more profound transformation and healing is possible. So.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, TJ.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, TJ. Thank you for all of you who tuned in or who will be watching this in the future. Any questions, just go ahead and DM me or TJ, or you can find us at consciousrecovery.com, firebird-healing.com. We are available for your questions and comments, and hope you found this talk inspiring. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. See you in Bali.